Welcome back to the RFM audio channel, guys, where we teach you the basics of listening. In today's episode, we are going to be taking you through how to use a compressor and what you're listening out for when you're doing compression. As always, this is recorded live on Twitch, so if you would like to follow me, there's a link down in the description to my Twitch channel. And please don't forget to like, share and subscribe, that way you guys don't miss a thing, and it helps this channel grow into something special as well. Anyway, enough jibber jabber, let's get on with the video. First of all, we're going to talk about what compression is. We're going to go through all the different controls of how to use compression, what you should be listening for, which can be one of the more harder parts of compression, because it can be quite a subtle effect. It has taken me years to properly listen and hear for what I'm looking for when I'm doing compression. But thankfully, from knowing and looking up a lot of tutorials and explaining it, which even I felt like even at university didn't explain it well enough for me. After years of trying, I now understand what I'm listening out for when I use compression. So that's the great thing that's what I hope to give to you guys today, is to give you that understanding of what to listen for, what to listen out for. And lastly, we also have a slight bonus tutorial at the end, so if you're interested, just make sure you guys stick around for that. The main reason for compression is to keep a level volume throughout a track. It can be on the vocals, it can be on the guitars, it can be on the drums. But today we're going to focus on the vocals, because I feel like that is the easiest one for you guys to hear a difference that's being made. So what we'll do is we'll go into Reaper. Okay, if you actually listen to that carefully, you can hear that a lot of the times it is sitting under the mix. Now the problem is that I could put the volume up, but then there's also parts in there that peak that seem to go a wee bit too loud as well. So the idea of compression is to reduce the dynamic range. Now the dynamic range is the difference in level between the lowest part in a vocal, or the lowest part in a signal, and the highest part in a signal. Okay, so the idea of compression is it takes these two parts and it brings them closer together, right? We don't necessarily want them the same, because then there'll be no impact, there'll be no back and forward with it. Anyway, as I was saying, the two parts bring it closer together. So that is the point in compression here, is to actually bring the dynamic range closer together. To make it smaller, bring it closer together. We don't want it at the same level at all times. If we do that, it just takes out all the life of the energy out of the track. But the main reason we can use for compression, now compression can be used in many different ways, but the first reason that we're going to do it here is to help these vocals cut through the mix, to actually help them stay level without getting too loud at certain parts, okay? Now you could easily just automate the volume in this, and it could take time, and it is actually worth automating volume, but that doesn't always get quite the results you're looking for, so that's why we use compression. Compression also has a tendency to also have its own tone as well. Each compressor itself can have like a coloration to a track. I've got this compressor here, which is the Pro C2 by FabFilter. This is, if you've watched my channel at all, you'll know that this is one of my favorite compressors that I use quite a lot. It is a quite nice, well-rounded compressor. So, the first two controls we're going to be looking at is these two here, which is a threshold and ratio. These are going to be the controls that are probably most important. Not necessarily the ones you'll use most, but these are going to be the ones that you'll have to take a little bit of time over just to make sure you get it right. Well, first of all, the threshold dictates what level compression begins to start taking place. Okay? As you can see, it's actually got that there. If I actually play the track for you a little bit, you'll actually see where the level goes up and down. Okay. That's if I enable it first. So you can see where the green point is. That's where the level is. So that dictates at what point compression starts taking place. Now, when compression does take place, you'll notice that the volume of the track goes down. So if I do this here, if you want, feel free to look at the graph to see what's going on as well, just to make it to help you understand a little bit more. I feel like this has got a good representation of what compression does as well. That's why I chose this particular plugin. You can see it's bringing the level down. Okay. The ratio itself decides how much compression takes place, when compression takes place. Now this can be a little bit confusing, especially when you're starting out. A really soft ratio would be like 2:1, whereas like a really aggressive ratio would be like 20:1. So what do these ratios mean? It means for, let's say we have a ratio of 3:1, okay? That means every time 3 dB of signal passes through the threshold, or that actually comes into contact with the threshold, only 1 dB gets through. So that means if 3 dB goes through, 3 decibels of level goes through, then 2 of it will be reduced. So only 1 decibel will get through. If, say, 6 dB goes through, only 2 decibels will pass through the compressor. It doesn't stop the level at that threshold. What it does is it lets it pass, a certain amount pass through. And that's what it is. If you actually then go harsher, say we go to like 10 dB, then it takes 10 decibels of signal before 1 decibel can pass through. Now, if you actually put the ratio up to what's got it as 100, this then becomes a limiter. Or, like, it says 100, but technically that's an infinite amount. That's what a limiter does. It stops it going past that thing. No level will go any higher than that set threshold. Limiters we don't really want to use. They sound quite, if used very aggressively, they sound very unnatural. They don't really sound quite as characteristic in the same way. We use them for mastering quite a lot, but at very little points, usually just to cut off particular peaks. A particular level you need to keep an eye on when you're using compression is gain reduction. Okay, so that's this little section, this little bar here. With the gain reduction, a good place to start is probably getting like 3 dBs of gain reduction. Now that's a place to start. That doesn't have to be the set thing. When you're first new to this, it's worth trying to aim for something like that. Currently got 1.6 of gain reduction, but I know there's a certain part when it says, I think it's harmony. Yeah, this bit gets really loud, so you can see that goes up to 4.5 of gain reduction right here. So that's not a bad level to go for, usually somewhere between 3 and 6 dB. It's a place to start. Now the problem with this is, obviously, by nature, what it does is it brings the level down, so all of the higher bits get quieter. So what we have to do, in order to properly get an idea of what this compression is doing, is we have to reintroduce the gain back into it. Best off listening to the likes of some of the higher bits, some of the bits that are particularly louder, rather. Like if I go here. And what we do is we bypass and enable it and see where it is, and then we apply what's called makeup gain. This one calls itself wet gain, but it's the same thing, right? Right, you can hear that's quieter, so we can try to bring that up a bit. So let's try that again. bad. So let's go through that whole bit and see if it's got a different setup here. Obviously, because the gain's a bit higher, it has brought it up, but that way the louder part isn't piercing the listener's ear at all. It's not coming in too hot. I'm sure you guys can hear the difference already. That's actually bringing in a lot more. It is actually bringing in a lot more to the track. It's cutting through a lot better as well. It sounds so much better. I meant actually to say that a good place to start off with is a 3-to-1 ratio. That's a nice even rounded ratio. This particular track, I feel needs a little bit more aggressive compression. So I've gone for a 4-to-1, nearly a 4.5-to-1 ratio. The next set of controls we need to go over, which can be sometimes I've found can be the two controls that are more difficult to listen out for, especially when you're starting out. It's difficult to hear what they're doing. So I'm going to try my best to really go over what they are, or how to listen out for these proper parts of compression. So the first bit we're going for is the attack right here. Now the attack decides how quickly the compressor kicks in. So after the level has gone above the threshold, it decides how fast it wants to clamp down on that. Now you could have like a really fast attack, which here is 0.005 milliseconds, which is almost instantly. Or the slowest one we can do is 250 milliseconds in this one. Some compressors have different speeds of attacks. I've seen some only start off at as fast as 0.5, and then the slowest is like 500 milliseconds. The thing with attack is you have to decide where to put it. Doing it too fast can actually really take away from the impact of what is actually called the transient. So that is the initial spike in level, right at the very beginning. It's when the transient, or actually it's also called the attack as well, is how long it takes for the volume to get to its highest peak, which is usually like right at the start of a vocal, especially with one like this. If I put the attack as fast as possible, it is going to make the vocal sound a bit bigger. Do a fast attack, then it can kind of muffle the sound of the vocal. So that is just going to like jump right in with the compression, okay, as soon as it starts going. Now if you listen to that I is really supposed to be impactful, but it just sounds muffled and really out of sorts with such a fast attack. Now, if we did the inverse of making the attack really slow, then it's hardly ever going to bring in any compression. Right, so we need to have somewhere kind of like in the middle. I like somewhere about like 50 milliseconds or 40 to 50 milliseconds for these kind of vocals. That way the initial hit or the initial transient of the vocal comes in, but everything else is evened out a lot quicker. So let's just try this a little bit. That's not so bad. The next bit, which I feel like I should cover, but can actually be quite difficult to hear especially when you're first starting out. This takes a while of getting used to the sound of compression in the first place. But it's the knee section. Now what the knee section does is it actually starts compression just before the signal hits the threshold. But the threshold then dictates the point it has that maximum amount of compression, or that maximum ratio. So say we did this like right in the middle. I think this kind of naturally starts off right in the middle. So it'll start compression roughly about here, but it won't have the full 4:1 ratio until you hit the actual threshold. Now that does give the compression a softer sound, but it also adds a little bit more compression to it. I personally like what's called a hard knee. I like it that it only starts compressing at that point, but that's for more aggressive vocals, such as rock vocals like this one. So it punches in when it needs to and goes out when it doesn't. Now, it is a bit of a difficult one to listen to. We can also do this as well. This is quite a soft knee. If you try to listen out, the compression actually takes place before it's meant to. One last control we need to look out for. There are actually plenty of other controls that's included in this one, but these are kind of the standards you'll find in all compressors. Well, I say all compressors, and most compressors. Especially like ones you get with your program, with your DAW. But this last particular one is your release. Now, if attack is the initial like increase in level, the release is the opposite of that. It is the tail end of it, pretty much. Now, the compressor continues to hold on to the signal for a certain amount of time. And that depends, like, even after it's gone below the threshold. Even after it's gone below the threshold, it continues to hold on because of this release. Okay. Now, if you just watch the end of these particular phrases and try keep an eye on the levels as well, I'm going to do a really slow release time, and you'll actually see how slow it takes for the compressor to reset back to where it was. So if you see this, see it didn't even make it to the top there. Now the problem with a slow release is that it then clamps down on particular. It can clamp down on the next set of transients that come across. So you don't want a really slow release all of the time unless it feels necessary. If I went for a fast one, it could come up really quickly in level, and that can sound unnatural as well. See, it's a little bit too fast. Now, the best way to do it is I try to do it musically. I try to make sure that the whole compressor resets before the next phrase. So usually somewhere about 200. So let's get this. Right, it's gone back to 0 before the next phrase. Good. that is, for the most part, what you would get in most compressors. Now, there is another compressor type that is actually very popular amongst the audio industry, and I'm about to go through that in a second. So let's hear the difference that we've got so far. Generally, it just sounds quieter, but I need to make sure I've got that particular bit at the right level, else this is all mute. Roughly about there. So if we listen to that at the very start of that. You can hear the vocal kind of like dipping in and out a lot of the time. And it is quite quiet for the most part. But then when we bring in the compression, it starts to bring it forward in the mix. When you're listening for release as well, don't forget to listen to the tail end of phrases to see if they just kind of fizzle and die out or if they actually manage to stay in through it. The thing I find with vocals is I'll usually use 2, maybe 3 compressors onto the one vocal just because it needs so much compression. If I try to put a lot of compression on the one track, it can sound unnatural, so that's why I use multiple compressors. Okay, so I actually did mention that I was gonna got like a wee bonus tutorial, which is also that other compressor type that I'd mentioned. Now, there's another type of compressor which is based off of a hardware compressor called the CLA 1176. It's quite a classic compressor. It has got quite a unique sound to it, and I have to admit it does sound pretty solid. It can sound very aggressive. If you've watched my stream before, you'll probably know I've already got another compressor that's one of my favorites, and I'm actually going to bring that up for you. And that is actually the plug-in version of this compressor, which is the CLA 76. Good Chris Lord Algae. Is that his name? I think that is. Anyway, tangent there. This compressor works slightly differently. Works a bit differently from a standard compressor that you would usually get in most things. Now, you'll usually find that these kind of like, these emulator plugins are actually quite popular. So you'll find this layout. Instead of having a threshold knob in it, it is actually set with a set threshold. Okay? And that's why you've got the input and output knobs instead. What you basically have to do is you basically start from 0. You'll hear nothing. And then you have to keep an eye on the gain reduction as to when it starts compressing. So let's say if I try to get like 5 dB of like gain reduction at max. And then after that, you have to put the output to make sure you got the right level. Do you hear me? Sweet melody. Do you hear me? Now the thing is the ratios in these are usually more on the aggressive side. You don't get softer ratios like 3 to 1 or 2 to 1. As you can see, the minimum here is 4 to 1. So if I'm doing like aggressive compression on vocals, I'll happily use this. A lot of the times I tend to use this on drums instead, because you've got these 8, 12 and 20 ratios, which are quite high. Now you might see that they also have this all button in there. So here's a wee bit of trivia for you, is when the CLA 1176 first came out, yeah, all it had was the 4, 8, 12 and 20 ratio buttons. But some people found that you could get like a really interesting and aggressive sounding ratio if you pushed all 4 of them in at the same time. Like, if you hit the individual one, it would unclick the other one, but they found that you could do them all at the same time, which I wouldn't be surprised if I end up trying to break it, but it ended up becoming such a staple that people actually added it in. I can add it into this if you want, so you can hear what it is. It's very aggressive. It's not going to work, but let's try it anyway.
Do you hear me? Sweet melody.
You can hear it kind of wavering in and out. Now, I probably wouldn't use this on vocals.
Do you hear me? Sweet melody. Do you hear me?
You can hear everything in the guy's voice.
In harmony. I feel crazy.
Do you know what? See, for this vocal, I'm changing my mind. I might actually use that in this. But I might pull it back slightly, but
Hear me, sweet melody. Do you hear me? In harmony.
it's got a nice aggression to it. The other thing I want to point out with these compressors is they're a little bit backwards, okay? Because see the attack and release knob. If you looked at the other one, you'll notice the far left is usually your fast, and then the far right is your slow. And that's the same for both the attack and release. On these ones, for some reason, I don't understand why, but it is the other way around. Far left is your slowest. So 1 is your slowest attack and your slowest release. 7 is your fastest attack and your fastest release. So I would probably put it somewhere in the middle for the attack, for the vocal,
Do you hear me?
and just kind of like a moderate release.
Sweet melody.
Now to get the actual, if you're wanting to get the actual timings for the attack and release, look up the what do you call it? The instruction manual for it. Most of these will have it when you actually buy them, so
Do you
to understand exactly what they are.
Sweet melody. Do you hear me? In harmony. I feel crazy. Do you hear me?
And there we are. That's compression, guys. Thank you very much, guys, for listening. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. That way you guys don't miss a thing. And don't forget to hit the wee bell icon as well. Don't forget to check out some of the other videos that you'll see up in the corner here. Take care of yourselves. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope your snares are slamming today.